Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexa Torres from Iowa CCI Action Fund and Nationals People Action. I am a high school student. I am 16 years old, and I am a proud daughter of undocumented immigrants. My mother and father came to give us a better life. They wanted us to go to school, to get good jobs. They wanted us to live without fear. My mother and father came to America because of a dream. Now I share their dream. But now I know firsthand what it's like to live with fear. Fear that I could come home and they would be gone. No. I got involved in this work because as a daughter of 2 immigrants, I know the struggles that immigrants and people of color in our country face. That's why I'm here today. And we're all in this room because we know our issues are connected and that these are real issues impacting our communities daily. We know we need racial justice in this country so people of color aren't profiled and sometimes taken from this life way too soon. We know we need racial justice in this country so corporations can't profit from inhumane separations of families like mine. We know we need environmental, climate, and agricultural justice so we have a planet for future generations, not dependent on fossil fuels like the Keystone and Bakken pipelines. And so corporate agriculture no longer destroys our land and communities. We know we need to get big money out of politics so everyday people like you and me can run for office and champion policies that put people before corporate greed and their agenda. We need and are fighting for a government of, by, and for the people, and an economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthy few. That's why I'm excited to introduce Senator Sanders, who is seeking the Democratic nomination for president, to hear about the issues that matter most to our communities and to respond to our questions. Please welcome to the stage Senator Sanders.
Alexis, thank you very much. Thank you, Alexis, for your generous introduction, but more importantly, thank you for your courage. You know, when I talk about the need to create a political revolution in this country, and when I talk about the fact that this is not just an election to elect a president, but to build a grassroots movement which will demand that Congress represents the people of this country rather than a handful of billionaires. What I am talking about in 50 states in the country is what CCI is doing right here in Iowa. Guys, thank you very much. You are doing it. You are bringing people together from all walks of life to say that government cannot continue to be dominated by wealthy campaign contributors and big money interests. Thank you for being a model for America. What this campaign and our political revolution is about is saying that there is something profoundly wrong in this country. When the middle class continues to disappear, when people work longer hours for lower wages, when we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country, and at the same time, almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. That's wrong. Together, we're going to change that.
This Minnesotan group called Knock, and we've got about 100 folks in the room today. We want to thank you so much for coming. I want to first start by saying Welcome to the Midwest, welcome to Iowa, and thank you. I have not decided who I'm voting for yet, but I want to thank you for being a candidate who's been the most unapologetic in my lifetime on taking on corporate interests, and I want to thank you for that. We came to Iowa from Minnesota, again, along with about 100 other folks, 25 leaders from Black-led organizations from throughout the Midwest. We came for a few reasons. Number one, to develop a long-term racial justice strategy. We know that the Midwest has some of the most glaring disparities in the country. We need to put together a long-term plan. Number two, to address the prison industrial complex, which you've mentioned in your opening statements. It cannot continue. The over-policing cannot continue, and we need to put together a plan anchored in our communities to solve it. The last is to put an agenda in front of the candidates to help inform and influence the presidential election. I want to talk a little bit about the policing piece that's happening in the Midwest. Many of us from the organizations that I mentioned have faced high-profile cases of police violence and police killings. The names that you will recognize are Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Tony Robinson, Daquan McDonald, Rakia Boyd, Betty Jones, and Jamar Clark in Minnesota. When I say Jamar Clark, many of the folks who knew him, family, friends, and others are in this room today. Raise your hand or say aye if you know Jamar Clark, know of him, or are demanding justice in his case. There was an occupation that followed the death of Jamar Clark. That occupation involved taking over a police precinct, shutting down freeways, shutting down malls, shutting down airports. This is happening in cities all over the Midwest, as you well know. Following that occupation, some local elected officials in Minneapolis decided to carve out from the budget $600,000 to go directly to a police station that was directly responsible for the death of Jamar Clark, to reinforce the police station, add reinforced glass, windows, fences, and barriers to keep the police safe. The community rallied to block that funding, and that proposal was pulled because of many of the folks in this room who demanded no more investment in a system that's broken. My question, Senator Sanders, is our black and brown communities throughout the Midwest are in absolute crisis. We need a president willing to take big, bold action in the moment. On behalf of the great folks of Iowa and throughout the Midwest, we're asking you to follow the model began at the 4th Precinct in Minneapolis in honor of Jamar Clark and divest from the tools of mass incarceration and punitive law enforcement and create a massive jobs and infrastructure bill. Cut the cord on things that don't work and commit $200 billion, not $1 million or $1,000 or $600,000. We want a president who would commit $200 billion or more and invest in the health of our communities. Can you make that commitment today?
No, I'll invest $1 trillion in rebuilding. Okay. All right. Look, this is the story. Thanks very much, Anthony. All right. Here's the story. Youth unemployment today is off the charts. African American youth unemployment and underemployment is 51%. All right, 51%. So what I think, you want a radical idea? Maybe we invest in education and jobs rather than jails and incarceration.
Several years ago, I was a full-time college student working a part-time job while taking care of my daughter. I got behind on paying a bill and decided to visit one of those neighborhood payday lending companies. I was approved for a loan. However, I did not realize that the extremely high interest rates would result in having to take out 2 additional loans from 2 other payday lending companies to help pay each one back. As a single mother, my financial shortfall was exploited by these payday lending companies. I got caught up in a system that made things worse for me, my family's quality of life, my ability to pay child care, medical expenses, student loans. Payday lending loans have been intentionally directed towards poor people and communities of color. That's not right. There is a need to bring relief to these communities. We need to have better regulations of financial systems that do not cause economic injustice or prey on poor people, but will instead invest in making affordable loans available to everyone. No one should feel that the only option is to take out predatory loans. Building wealth should be the focus. We need an administration that will protect us from economic violence and injustice. Senator Sanders, what would you do to ensure that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and other federal financial regulators interact with communities that have been stripped of wealth by abusive, predatory lending and chronic disinvestment?
Thank you very much, Angela. Angela, if I might, let me just tell you a brief story. About 2 months ago, I went to a community in Baltimore, largely African American and extremely poor. Unemployment about 50%, most of the buildings shuttered up. And you know what was amazing? In fact, that was the community where Freddie Gray came from. And what was amazing when you go into that community is you cannot find a grocery store. The only places you find these little shops where they're selling you booze and potato chips. And you know what else you can't find? A normal bank. Can't find a bank. The only financial institutions are payday lenders, okay? So what do we got to do? The payday lenders, as all of you know, are involved in usury in this country. And anybody who studies religion, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, whether it's Judaism, anyone knows anything, is in all cases, usury is regarded as a sin. So we will fight for usury legislation limiting the interest rates that any institution can charge.
Clinton, who is regrettably not here today, made the claim yesterday that when President Obama wrote his op-ed about not being able to support someone who doesn't back his gun control measures, he was referring to you. Her campaign has cited 5 votes that you cast against the Brady Bill, as well as several to prevent gun violence victims from seeking civil damages against manufacturers. You've suggested previously that your votes have reflected pro-gun attitudes in Vermont, which you represent. But some of your opponents wonder, where is that fierce independent-mindedness that you show on every other issue when it comes to gun? And could you talk to us about where your heart is and your evolution on this?
I know I'm being attacked as being a stooge for the NRA. Well, some stooge. I have a D- voting record, lifetime voting record for the NRA. Not quite a stooge. Number 3, as a member of the House and the Senate, I have voted for instant background checks, and I absolutely agree with what the President is trying to do in his executive order. Which is to deal with a very common sense approach.
I want to shift gears for a minute and talk about foreign affairs, and in particular, the role of U.S. foreign policy when it comes to upholding human rights and women's rights internationally. So I'm wondering what you think that role should be, and whether you believe that in situations like Boko Haram in Nigeria kidnapping schoolgirls, or the Taliban's repression of women in Afghanistan, or honor killings, mass rapes, female feticide, female genital mutilation, child marriage, in various parts of the world, Should they ever warrant direct U.S. intervention? And I'm talking about any kind of intervention, military intervention, withholding of foreign aid, diplomatic pressure. And how would you balance the line between necessary global pressure and heavy-handed intervention on behalf of populations in sovereign states that don't have a voice?
That's a light question.
That is an excellent question. It's a difficult question, and it can't be answered simply. I think what makes our country great is that we have had a history for so many years, a far from perfect history to be sure, but a history which has stood up and fought for human dignity. Now, we have failed in many ways, but we have also been a beacon of hope for people all over the world. And as president, I once again will shine that torch as high as I can to say that the United States of America believes in human dignity, and we believe in social justice, and we believe in equal rights, and we will end and help countries all over the world end all forms of bigotry and prejudice. That's what I want the United States to be seen as, the country all over the world. Yes, we've got to give people a fair shot at getting their feet back on the ground again, getting back into their communities and earning a living. And let me touch on another issue. There are many, many hundreds of thousands of people who are felons in this country who serve their time but don't have the right to vote. I don't have the exact number in my head, but it is a shockingly high number of African American men who have lost their right to vote and participate in American democracy. Now, I believe if somebody does his time, he's paying the price. He doesn't lose his democratic rights to participate in our society.
With that, please join me in thanking Senator Bernie Sanders for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much.
Great job. That was
We
really
really
good.
appreciate the stand.
That's great.
Thank you. And before you go anywhere, we have two final speakers to close us out.